Hey folks, and welcome back to Glenn and Adrian's Rock Talk. That's Adrian.
And there's Glenn.
Hey, and we are here to talk to you again about our recent listens. This is our new series of most played albums in a given period of time. So this is actually episode number 2. Some of them are new to us and some are classics, but all are worth mentioning. Adrian, do you want to start?
Yeah, the first album that's on my list is Brain Salad Surgery by Emerson, Lake, and Palmer. And this album has been a favorite of mine for a long time. Carnival 9 is an awesome piece of work, and so is Toccata, which is a first piano concerto for fourth movement by Alberto Ginastera. That one was made famous around Boston by they used to have this thing called the Creature Double Feature, this horror movie type thing.
Channel 56.
Anyway, they played this during the commercial.
In between Godzilla Eats Japan.
Something like that, yeah.
Welcome to the Creature Double Feature.
Jerusalem starts off the album, and that's a pretty good performance too. So I've mentioned Carnival 9, and that's the big masterpiece that's on half of side 1 and side 2. Also, Benny the Bouncer is a interesting little story about a bar fight. Only song I haven't mentioned is Still You Turn Me On, and well, anyway, I like this album. That's my first choice.
Okay, so my first album this week is 10 Years After Undead. This is the second album released by 10 Years After. It came out in 1968. It is indeed a live album with a funny name. It's the first album we got to hear the song I'm Going Home on a 10 Years After record. And that's, of course, their signature tune. That's the one they did at Woodstock. Some people don't rate this album as highly as some other live albums by 10 Years After, but I have to say I latched onto it early, and it's been one of my favorites from that time period for whatever reason. I mean, it's a club. It's not an arena, and you can tell, but very strong playing from this group. So I would highly recommend that album.
Okay, I guess my second choice would be Smiley Smile by the Beach Boys. And, Smile was a real treasure from this time period, and it's a better album, but it's got kind of a special meaning to me, I guess. It was my introduction to the psychedelic Beach Boys. But I still like the version of Heroes and Villains on this album, I guess because it's how I got introduced to it. There are other gems on this album as well that I haven't really seen anywhere else, and they're just gems for being there. And I know, if this was Star Trek, Spock would say this is highly illogical.
Highly illogical.
Probably be right, but it's just means a lot to me.
Well said. Well, yeah, the first place that I found that album personally, it was a record in the library available for checkout, so I brought it home and taped it. Very, very strange album, but good stuff. I only found out years later that it was part of the Smile Project, scraps, from the Smile sessions. 2012, the Smile sessions came out, and then Brian Wilson himself put out Brian Wilson Presents Smile in 2004. So it's interesting to compare those. All right, so my number 2 is a record I just got. Ladies and gentlemen, The Bangles. And actually, this is a compilation of stuff that came out before they had their record deal. It's demos, and it's also things that were released when they were still called The Bangs, which is the greatest name ever. They had a little bit more of an edge to them at that point, before they got their deal. I mean, when I knew The Bangles, it was the 80s, and I knew nothing about them beyond, it was a bunch of girls. But it wasn't necessarily the Go-Go's. They weren't being promoted that way. It was more like Bananarama or some other manufactured group, that just sang along the tracks. Well, it turns out that's not the case with the Bangles. They all play their own instruments, and they play well, and they make good choices. Like they even do a Big Star song on one of their albums. And, of course, they do the love song 7 and 7 Is. There's a live take from 1984 on here, which is pretty good. They rocked pretty hard on that one. And that's got, of course, the very difficult drums going on. And it's their drummer.
Oh, yeah. 7 and 7 Is.
Yeah. So they were talented. Anyway, this is pretty much the Bangles that I've been looking for my whole life, is the early stuff. So I was like, oh, they put it out. Great. So good stuff. I would recommend it.
Okay, my third choice would be Diver Down by Van Halen. I know what you're thinking. I listened to this in the past week. My favorite track from this would probably be the double song Cathedral Secrets. And I mean, I like the other albums. I think Van Halen, Fair Warning, and Women and Children, they're all better albums, but I like this one.
I think you're right. At Cathedral, it's funny. I hear that Eddie actually broke his volume knob, which is what he was using throughout that thing, to get that sound. And then it broke right at the very end of the song, right at the end of the take. So I was like, oh, so it was fine. I was like, oh, okay, well, we're done anyway. But yeah, those are strong original tracks anyway.
I somehow believe that with a volume knob.
Yeah, he was putting it really through its rigor, I guess. Okay, so my number 3, Nektar, Down to Earth. Now, Nektar is a progressive rock band from Germany, and I believe this is their 5th album. It came out in 1974, and this one's more accessible than a lot of the stuff that came before it. But just for reference, you can hear just little bits of, say, Yes, including the harmonies, maybe some early Pink Floyd jam sound to it, things like that. There are horns on here, which I think are not really necessary, but there's actually some pretty strong writing. It's a little less characteristic of the band than the stuff that had come before it, but not by much. And to my ears, I mean, it is a little different, but apparently there was a revolt among fans. Some of them are like, this is not the progressive rock I signed up for. This is, you're selling out, guys. But it was not the case. It's actually a pretty strong album and a good listen. And you can probably find it cheap.
Sounds like a good band. Vocals of Yes and jamming like Pink Floyd.
Yeah, we've got to give them a listen sometime. Got to check them out.
My number 4 choice of the past week is Killers by Iron Maiden.
Nice.
And there's a similar story to this, to my Diver Down review. This was also during the same special time in my life, and it's way different from Diver Down, but it brings me back. Songs like "Murders in the Rue Morgue," "Killers," and "Prodigal Son" are among the the wonderful metal and punk strains of Paul Di'Anno on vocals.
Oh yeah,
who's the guy before Bruce. Bruce shows up on the next album, but that's a different album. And Paul Di'Anno's singing style is kind of just very gritty, and it fits the music on the album really well. I mean, you have to hear him.
And Wrathchild's on that album too. Which is
Wrathchild, yes, that's a popular one that's on that album.
It's one of my favorites. Gotta love the bass and everything on it.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, I like that one too. Sometimes I feel like that's my favorite Iron Maiden album, which is probably sacrilege, but sometimes I feel that way. I don't know why. So good choice. Okay, so my next choice, number 4, is going to be Uriah Heep, Salisbury. So this actually came out in a few different editions. Sometimes a song or two is different, but this one has a wonderful side 1. There's 4 really strong tracks on it. One called High Priestess, another The Park, and then Time to Live and Lady in Black. This is one of those bands that's kind of operatic. They're very bombastic. Well, we've done Demons and Wizards in the past.
Yeah.
So this is a little bit more primal than that, a little bit more 60s, it's pretty cool, but sometimes it's a little overwrought, but I think that's supposed to be part of it. I think that's what they're aiming for, is kind of a experience like that. So, Lady in Black is a wonderful track. So side 1, I think, is solid. Side 2 starts with a 3-minute song called Simon the Bullet Freak, which is okay. And then there's a 16-minute song called Salisbury, the title track. So almost an album side for it. And that's one where I think they maybe got a little overwrought. It's all right. It's not bad, but it just after 13, 14, 15, you get to minute 16, you're like, okay, that's enough. I think I've had enough. There are horns on this too, which sometimes they work, sometimes they don't. Anyway, I do think it's a good album, and side one in particular, I mean, that alone, it's worth owning the record for. And some people actually really like Salisbury. I don't happen to be one. I don't tend to favor the album long sides. I mean, sometimes they work. I mean, look at Pink Floyd Echoes, Other times, well, you're asking a lot. I'm one of those people that doesn't really like the Rare Earth 20-minute version of Get Ready, which is supposed to be a classic, and it's too much, man. It's a 4-minute song. Anyway, so that's my number 4, Uriah Heep, Salisbury.
So my last choice is something that I've listened to in the past week for the first time. It's a album called Da Capo by a band called Love, and I've been wanting to study these guys because I see this band mentioned in the comment section like time and time again, and so I thought I wanted to just check this out.
Yeah,
see what they sounded like.
Pretty interesting band, huh?
Yeah, Stephanie Knows Who's very refreshing to listen to for the first time. Yeah. I mean, they maintain this sort of garage sound despite the fact that they also use instruments like, a harpsichord and the flute. Yep.
And they have all those crazy time signatures.
Yeah. One song that stood out was 7 and 7 Is.
Oh yeah, classic. That's a classic.
Yeah, it's just got it's got this drum rhythm or whatever. It kind of makes me think of the Old West or something like that. You're people riding off of the horses or whatever. But highly psychedelic lyrics. No, it's really a good piece of work anyway. And Revelation is by far the longest track on this album, taking up all of side 2. And I think it's a very interesting track. I kind of thought it was the most interesting track on the record. I've heard that it's not a very popular track, but I like it. I think there are some parts of it that even remind me of Interstellar Overdrive by Pink Floyd, and that's some pretty high praise, by the way. And I think Interstellar Overdrive is trippier, but I like it.
Yeah, it's a pretty interesting piece. I can tell you the one of the influences for them was John Coltrane. They were kind of thinking they were getting into jazz rock. I think they would cringe at the name jazz rock, but that's basically where they were trying to go. But the thing is, right around that time is when John Coltrane was in his most extreme phase of his career. This was after Love Supreme, and where he had kind of gone off to a place where most listeners just said, whoa, what's he doing? But this is the stuff the most out there is when this was happening. So just an interesting thing. And you can kind of hear a little of that going in there. And I also hear a little Doors in them too, which would make sense because they were both playing at the Whiskey A Go-Go around that time. So.
Yeah, I'd say, there's a similar Doors sound as well. I can see how you'd say that.
Well, good. So overall, though, you liked the record?
Yes. Yeah, I thought it was a good record.
I have to take another look at Love. All right, so my number 5, and I hope it's not cheating, but it's a recent compilation by Motorhead, Everything Louder Forever. Now, of course, everybody out there that's got no remorse, you're saying, well, I've already got a compilation. Well, yes, but this covers the next 30 years as well as the earlier period. So maybe a quarter of this covers what you might already have. But you are guaranteed, even if you have a large Motorhead collection, to not have some of the songs on here because it covers so much ground all the way to the end. It was cheap. I've got it for $12, brand new.
Good deal.
Yeah. So that's just the thing. It's funny how many Motorhead CDs in particular can be found kind of cheap, but this one in particular is so worth it, even if you're a longtime fan with a lot of the catalog. It's got a nice sequence to it, and it's bound to have things you maybe haven't heard before. So, well worth it. Go out and get it. You'll be glad you did.
I'm going to go to Amazon and get me a copy of that Motorhead CD.
Definitely worthwhile. All right, so those are our picks for this week. And if you have any thoughts on any of those, please let us know in the comments below. If you liked this, please give us a like. If you'd like to see more, just subscribe, and we'll be sure to be in your feed again on a pretty regular basis with videos like this and also other videos, various things, reactions, going over careers of people, album reviews. In fact, if there's anything that we mentioned that you'd really love us to do a longer deep dive review on, you can also let us know about that. Okay, so with that, I think we'll catch you next time. All right, take care, folks.
All right. See you guys later.